What happens when the most dangerous man in Chicago meets the one woman who isn't afraid of him or his demonic toddler? She wasn't a supermodel. She was a broke, overweight maid who just needed rent money. But one unexpected kiss from a violent toddler changed the criminal underworld forever. Vincent Romano was a man who traded in fear. As the undisputed head of the Chicago syndicate, he controlled shipping ports, politicians, and union bosses from the Gold Coast down to the gritty South Side. He wore bespoke Brioni suits, checked the time on a $100,000 Patek Philippe, and could end a man's life with a subtle nod. Yet the most powerful man in Illinois was currently being held hostage by a 2-year-old, his son, Leo. Since the car bombing that took Leo's mother a year ago, a hit meant for Vincent, the boy had transformed from a happy infant into a miniature terror. The grief and chaos of the Romano household had manifested in Leo as pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't just cry, he destroyed. In the past 6 weeks alone, Leo had terrorized 5 highly qualified elite nannies. He threw heavy wooden blocks, shattered antique vases, and just yesterday he had bitten Nanny Greta so hard on the forearm that she required a trip to Northwestern Memorial Hospital for stitches. Greta had run out of the Highland Park mansion in tears, threatening a lawsuit, despite the hefty stack of $100 bills Vincent's enforcer Sal had shoved into her purse. Vincent sat behind his massive mahogany desk, rubbing his temples. The house was dead silent, save for the distant muffled screams of his son down the east wing. He needed someone tough, someone who wouldn't break. Miles away in a cramped, mold-infested apartment in Pilsen, Ruby Jenkins was just trying to breathe. She sat on the edge of her sagging mattress, clutching a past-due eviction notice in her plump, trembling hands. Ruby was 24, standing 5'4", and weighing 250 pounds. Society had never been kind to her. She was used to the sideways glances on the CTA bus, the cruel whispers in the grocery store aisles, and the constant crushing weight of feeling invisible unless she was being judged. But right now, her weight was the least of her worries. Her father had passed away from lung cancer 6 months ago, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt. Desperate to keep him in a decent hospice, Ruby had taken a loan from a neighborhood shark named Mickey Sullivan. Now Mickey wanted his money. With interest, she was working 3 jobs, cleaning a diner at dawn, stocking shelves at a pharmacy in the afternoon, and doing laundry for a cheap motel at night. But it wasn't enough. She needed a miracle. Her phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Hastings from the elite domestic placement agency. Ruby had been begging her for a high-paying residential job for weeks. "Ruby," Mrs. Hastings's voice crackled, sounding strained. "I have a placement. It's unconventional. It's an emergency hire for a very wealthy, very private client in Highland Park. The pay is 4 times the standard rate, paid in cash weekly." Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. 4 times the rate that would pay off Mickey in 2 months. "I'll take it. Whatever it is, I'll take it." "Listen to me carefully, dear," Mrs. Hastings warned. "The client is demanding. The child is difficult, and the environment is intense. The last girl left in an ambulance. Are you sure?" "I've survived cleaning the fryers at Pete's Diner at 3 a.m., Ruby said, forcing a nervous laugh. "I can handle a rich kid." 2 hours later, Ruby stepped off the metro train and walked the half-mile to the address provided. She was sweating profusely in her best, albeit faded, navy blue thrift store dress. The fabric clung tightly to her broad hips and thick thighs, and her worn-out flats offered 0 support. When she finally arrived at the wrought-iron gates, she gasped. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress. 10-foot stone walls surrounded the property, topped with discreet security cameras, Two massive men in dark suits, bulging with obvious concealed weapons, stood by the guardhouse. "Name," the larger one, grunted his cold eyes, scanning her soft, heavy frame with blatant skepticism. "Ah, Ruby Jenkins. The agency sent me." The guard murmured into a radio strapped to his shoulder. After a tense pause, the heavy iron gates swung open with a mechanical hum. "Go straight to the main doors. Don't wander the grounds." Ruby nodded, clutching her worn faux leather purse to her chest. As she walked up the sweeping driveway, flanked by perfectly manicured hedges and a fountain, she felt entirely out of place. She was a fat, broke girl from the slums walking into a palace. She expected a butler to greet her. Instead, the heavy oak doors were pulled open by another man in a suit, this one with a jagged scar running down his jawline. "In here," he commanded, leading her down a hallway lined with priceless oil paintings. He opened a door to a sprawling library and gestured for her to step inside. "The boss will be right with you." Ruby stood in the center of the room, too terrified to sit on the pristine white leather sofas. She wiped her sweaty palms on her dress, trying to slow her breathing. The door clicked open behind her. Vincent Romano walked into the library, bringing the temperature of the room down by 10 degrees. He was devastatingly handsome, with jet-black hair slightly silvering at the temples, sharp cheekbones and dark assessing eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He stopped a few feet away, folding his arms across his broad chest. His gaze swept over Ruby. He took in her flushed, round face, the tight fit of her cheap dress, the way she shifted uncomfortably from one worn shoe to the other. Vincent was a man who dealt in efficiency and peak performance. The woman standing before him looked like she would be out of breath climbing a single flight of stairs. "You're the replacement." Vincent's voice was a low, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver down Ruby's spine. It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. "Yes, sir. Ruby Jenkins," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Vincent sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Hastings is wasting my time. I asked for someone resilient, someone fast. My son is 2 years old, but he has the energy of a wild animal and the temper of a cornered dog. He requires constant chasing, physical restraint at times, and hypervigilance. Miss Jenkins, with all due respect to your situation, you do not look physically capable of keeping up with him." The word stung, hitting Ruby in her deepest insecurity, but she was too desperate to cry. She needed this money. Mickey's thugs had followed her home last night. If she didn't get this job, she was dead anyway. Ruby squared her heavy shoulders, lifting her chin. "Mr. Romano, I may not be built like a track star, but I am strong. I've worked on my feet my entire life. I don't break, I don't quit, and I'm not afraid of hard work. Or tantrums." Vincent raised a dark eyebrow, mildly amused by her sudden burst of defiance. Usually people stuttered and shrank in his presence. Before he could dismiss her, a blood-curdling scream echoed down the marble hallway. The heavy library doors burst open. Little Leo, a beautiful boy with curly black hair and his father's dark eyes, ran in. He was a hurricane of destruction. He had a heavy, solid-wood toy train engine in his hand. Behind him, a panicked maid was trying to catch him, but Leo was too fast. "No, no, I hate it!" Leo shrieked, his face red and streaked with angry tears. He hurled the heavy wooden train engine blindly into the room. It flew directly toward Ruby. Vincent lunged forward, yelling a warning, but it was too late. The heavy wood struck Ruby hard on the collarbone. It was a vicious hit, enough to make a grown man curse. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, and she stumbled back a half-step, clutching her chest. Vincent prepared for the inevitable. The tears, the screaming, the immediate resignation. The last nanny had called the police over a tossed sippy cup, but Ruby didn't scream. She didn't cry. She took a deep breath, wincing slightly, as the pain bloomed across her collarbone, and then she did something no one in that house had done in a year. She dropped to her knees. It was a heavy, ungraceful movement, but it put her exactly at eye level with the furious toddler. Leo stopped dead in his tracks, panting, his little fists clenched. He stared at the large woman, kneeling on his father's expensive Persian rug. He was waiting for her to yell. He was waiting for her to grab him, to drag him away, to look at him, with the same fear and frustration everyone else did. "Well," Ruby said softly, her voice remarkably calm and coated in a warm, honeyed southern drawl she'd inherited from her grandmother. "That was a mighty big throw for such a little guy. Are you trying out for the Cubs, or are you just having a really bad day?" Leo blinked, confused by the gentle tone. He stomped his foot. "Go way bad." "I know," Ruby murmured, ignoring the throbbing pain in her chest. She didn't move toward him. She just opened her thick, soft arms slightly. "I know it feels bad inside right now. It feels like a big hot storm in your tummy, doesn't it? Makes you want to break things." Vincent watched, paralyzed. His men stood at the door hands, hovering near their holsters, equally stunned. The room was perfectly still. Leo's lower lip began to tremble. The pure rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by a profound, overwhelming sadness. For a year he had been surrounded by hard, dangerous men in suits and thin, nervous nannies who treated him like a ticking time bomb. He was surrounded by cold, marble, sharp edges and fear. But looking at Ruby, he saw something else. He saw softness. He saw warmth. Slowly, tentatively, the boy took a step forward. Then another. Ruby stayed perfectly still, maintaining a gentle, reassuring smile, even as her heart pounded. When Leo was within arm's reach, the boy didn't hit her. Instead, he collapsed forward. Ruby instinctively caught him, wrapping her plush, heavy arms around his small frame. She pulled him into her chest, burying his face in the soft expanse of her bosom. She rocked back on her heels, humming a low, soothing melody, her large hand gently stroking his dark curls. To the absolute shock of everyone in the room, the ferocious toddler didn't fight her. He melted. The tension drained from his small body, and he began to sob. Not the screaming cries of anger, but the heartbreaking whimpers of a child who just missed his mother. Ruby held him tight, absorbing his grief, a soft mountain of comfort, in a house of stone. After a few minutes, the crying subsided into quiet hiccups. Leo pulled his head back, looking up at Ruby's round face. Her cheeks were pink, and she had a kind, crinkling smile. Without a word, the boy who had bitten his last caretaker to the bone leaned forward, pressed his little hands against Ruby's plump cheeks, and planted a sloppy wet kiss right on her nose. He then rested his head back against her chest and closed his eyes. Vincent Romano stood frozen in the center of the library. He felt as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. He stared at the poor, overweight maid in the cheap dress, holding his son with a natural maternal grace that money couldn't buy. He looked at Sal, who was staring open-mouthed from the doorway. Vincent cleared his throat, adjusting the cuffs of his suit to hide the sudden, unfamiliar tightening in his chest. "Sal," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Pay the agency their fee. Cancel the rest of the interviews." Vincent stepped closer, looking down at Ruby. The harsh judgment was completely gone from his dark eyes, replaced by an intense, burning curiosity. "Miss Jenkins," Vincent said, quietly, ensuring he didn't wake the sleeping boy in her arms. "Whatever you were making before, I'm tripling it. You live here now. Welcome to the family." Life inside the Romano estate shifted on its axis the day Ruby Jenkins moved into the East Wing. The sprawling Highland Park mansion, previously a cold mausoleum echoing with tantrums, and the heavy footsteps of armed guards slowly began to thaw. For the first time in a year, Vincent found himself looking forward to coming home. He would return from tense sit-downs with union bosses at the Palmer House Hilton, or reviewing illicit shipping manifests down by Navy Pier, only to be greeted by a scene that defied all his expectations. Ruby was a revelation. She didn't try to discipline Leo with harsh words or cold timeouts. Instead, she used her natural warmth and imposing soft presence to anchor the boy. When Leo had a meltdown over his peas at dinner, Ruby didn't yell. She simply scooped him up, sat him on her wide, plush lap, and turned, eating into a game. Her thick, dimpled fingers making airplane noises until the toddler was giggling uncontrollably. Vincent, nursing a glass of Macallan 25 in the shadows of the dining room archway, watched them intently. He noticed the way Ruby's cheap, ill-fitting clothes had been replaced by beautiful custom-tailored linen dresses that Sal had procured at his strict command. The new clothes hugged her generous curves, her heavy breasts, her wide hips, the soft roll of her stomach, in a way that made Vincent's mouth go inexplicably dry. In his world, women were usually stick-thin socialites, or surgically enhanced models clinging to the arms of cartel leaders. They were sharp, calculated, and entirely predictable. Ruby was different. She was real. She was a sanctuary. One evening, after Leo had been tucked into bed, Vincent found Ruby in the massive industrial kitchen. She was standing at the marble island, humming softly to herself as she kneaded dough. She wore a simple white apron over a floral dress, her thick arms dusted with flour. "Mrs. Hastings never mentioned you were a baker," Vincent said, stepping into the light. Ruby jumped, nearly knocking over a bowl of sugar. She clutched her chest, her round cheeks flushing a deep, embarrassed crimson. "Oh, Mr. Romano, you startled me. I couldn't sleep. The bed in my room is softer than anything I've ever laid on. It feels like a cloud, but my back is used to a mattress with broken springs. Baking helps me settle my nerves." Vincent walked closer, the scent of vanilla and yeast wrapping around him. "What are you making?" "Just some cinnamon rolls for Leo's breakfast, and maybe a few for Sal and the boys at the front gate. Those men look like they haven't had a home-cooked meal since the Daily administration." A rare, genuine smile tugged at the corner of Vincent's mouth. "You're feeding my enforcer's pastries. A fed guard is an attentive guard, sir," Ruby replied, wiping her floury hands on her apron. She looked down, suddenly hyper-aware of her size, next to his towering, athletic frame. "I hope I'm not overstepping. I know I take up a lot of space here, and I don't want to be a bother." Vincent closed the distance between them. He reached out his large, scarred hand, gently tilting her chin up, so her warm brown eyes met his dark, intense gaze. "You don't take up too much space, Ruby. For the first time, this house actually feels full. Don't ever apologize for who you are." His thumb brushed a smudge of flour from her plump cheek. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to Ruby's core. She had spent her entire life feeling utterly undesirable, conditioned by cruel society to believe her heavy body made her unworthy of romance, let alone the attention of a devastatingly handsome billionaire. Yet the way Vincent looked at her like a starving man looking at a feast made her head spin. But outside the high stone walls of the estate, Ruby's past was catching up to her. Mickey Sullivan, the loan shark from her old Pilsen neighborhood, was not a man who simply forgot a debt. Mickey was a bottom feeder in the Chicago underworld, running a small-time racketeering crew that occasionally crossed paths with the massive O'Malley syndicate. When Ruby missed her monthly interest payment, because she had been strictly forbidden, by Vincent's security protocol to leave the estate for her own safety, Mickey started digging. It didn't take long for his street soldiers to track her movements, from the CTA bus lines to the private agency, and eventually to the gates of the Romano estate. Ruby's illusion of safety shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Vincent had insisted she take a few hours off to visit her father's grave at the Rose Hill Cemetery. Sal had driven her in one of the armoured escalades, but gave her privacy to walk among the headstones. As Ruby knelt by her father's modest marker, a cold, bony hand clamped down on her thick shoulder. "Well, well, look at you all dressed up in designer threads," a raspy voice hissed. Ruby gasped and twisted around. Mickey Sullivan stood there, flanked by two hulking thugs holding umbrellas. Mickey had a rat-like face and a gold tooth that flashed in the gloomy light. "Mickey." Ruby breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I have your money. I swear. I can pay off the whole loan right now." She reached for her purse where she had stashed her first week's cash payment. Mickey snatched her wrist, his grip bruising. "Keep your chump change, pork chop. I know who you're working for. Vincent Romano, the untouchable king of the city." "I'm just a nanny," Ruby stammered, terrified. "I clean up toys and bake." "And you have access," Mickey countered, leaning in, close his breath, smelling of stale smoke and cheap beer. "The O'Malley boys have been trying to get the layout of Romano's security grid for a year. The gate codes the guard, shifts the camera blind spots. You're going to get them for me." "No," Ruby said, her maternal instincts violently rejecting the idea. "I won't put Leo in danger. I won't do it." Mickey's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. He pulled a heavy, snub-nosed revolver from his jacket pocket and tapped the cold steel against Ruby's soft, trembling cheek. "Listen to me, you fat cow. You think Romano gives a damn about you? You're a temporary joke to him. If you don't bring me those security schedules by Friday night at the old meat-packing plant on Halstead, I'm not just going to kill you. I'm going to tell the O'Malley crew exactly when the kid is most vulnerable, and I'll let them do the job." Mickey shoved her back, causing Ruby to stumble and fall hard onto the wet, muddy grass. "Friday, Ruby, or the kid's brains are on the marble floors." For the next 3 days, Ruby was a ghost of her former self. The baking stopped. Her warm, ringing laughter vanished. She moved through the mansion in a state of sheer panic, holding Leo so tightly the toddler frequently squirmed in confusion. Vincent noticed immediately. The Mafia boss read people for a living, and the woman who had brought sunshine into his dark world was suddenly shrouded in terror. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way she flinched when a door slammed, and the subtle purple bruise lingering on her wrist. On Thursday night, Vincent could take it no longer. He found Ruby sitting in the dark in the nursery, watching Leo sleep in his crib. She was crying silently, fat tears rolling down her round cheeks. "Who did it?" Vincent asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the lethal absolute authority of a man who commanded an army. Ruby jumped, wiping her eyes frantically. "Mr. Romano." "It's nothing, just missing my dad." Vincent stepped into the room, locking the door behind him. He walked over to her, knelt in front of her chair, and gently took her bruised wrist in his hands. He traced the dark marks left by Mickey's fingers. "This isn't grief, Ruby. This is a threat. You are under my roof. You are under my protection. Tell me who touched you." The dam broke. Ruby couldn't lie to him. Shaking with sobs, she confessed everything. She told him about her father's medical bills, Mickey Sullivan, the loan, the ambush at the cemetery, and the demand for the security codes. "I was going to leave," she cried, burying her face in her thick hands. "I was going to pack my bags tonight and run away so they couldn't use me to hurt Leo. I would never betray you, Vincent. I would die before I let them touch a hair on his head." Vincent didn't explode. He didn't yell. An unnatural, terrifying calm washed over his handsome features. It was the face he wore right before he dismantled an empire. He reached up and pulled Ruby's hands away from her face. He cupped her soft, tear-stained cheeks. "You aren't going anywhere," he whispered fiercely. "You think you're a danger to us, Ruby? You are the only thing keeping us together. And nobody, absolutely nobody, threatens my family." He stood up, his eyes burning with a cold black fire. "Get some sleep, Mia Cara. Mickey Sullivan just made the final mistake of his miserable life." Friday night arrived with a torrential downpour washing the gritty streets of Chicago in a sheet of grey. Inside the abandoned, rusting meatpacking plant on Halsted Street, Mickey Sullivan paced nervously. He checked his cheap gold watch. It was midnight. "Where is this broad?" he muttered to his two heavily armed goons. "If she tipped him off—" Suddenly the heavy metal doors at the far end of the warehouse blew completely off their hinges with a deafening crash, slamming into the concrete floor. Mickey's men raised their weapons, but it was useless. Floodlights from 4 armored SUVs blinded them instantly. A dozen men in tactical gear armed with suppressed automatic rifles swarmed the room, disarming Mickey's thugs in less than 10 seconds, forcing them to their knees. Out of the blinding light, a single figure walked forward. The rain pounded against the tin roof, matching the heavy, deliberate sound of Vincent Romano's leather shoes on the concrete. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, completely unfazed by the dampness in the air. Mickey dropped his revolver, his knees knocking together. "Romano? Mr. Romano, this is a misunderstanding." Vincent stopped a few feet away, pulling a pair of black leather gloves from his pocket and slowly pulling them onto his hands. "You put your hands on my sons, Nanny." Vincent stated his voice, a low, terrifying rumble that echoed in the cavernous space. "You threatened a woman who is under my personal protection. You called her out of her name, and you threatened my child." "I didn't mean it. I was just trying to collect a debt." Mickey shrieked, backing away until his spine hit a rusted meat-hook pillar. "The debt is paid," Vincent said, pulling a sleek, silver-suppressed pistol from his shoulder holster. "And so is your life." Before Mickey could scream, 2 muffled shots echoed through the warehouse. Vincent turned away before the body even hit the floor, slipping his gun back into its holster. He looked at Sal, who was standing by the SUVs. "Clean this up, and send a message to the O'Malley Syndicate. If they so much as look at my zip code again, I'll burn their entire operation to the ground." An hour later, Vincent walked back into the warm, quiet sanctuary of his mansion. He shed his wetsuit jacket and walked straight to Ruby's quarters. She was awake, pacing the floor in her thick, fuzzy robe, biting her nails. When Vincent opened the door completely unharmed, a massive wave of relief washed over her. Without thinking about boundaries or her place as an employee, Ruby ran across the room and threw her heavy arms around his neck. Vincent caught her effortlessly, his strong arms wrapping around her thick waist, lifting her slightly off the ground. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the sweet scent of vanilla and sugar that always clung to her skin. "It's over," he murmured against her collarbone. "He will never haunt you again." Ruby pulled back slightly, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. "Vincent, you didn't have to. I'm just a maid." "You are not a maid," Vincent said fiercely, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You are the woman who brought my son back to me. You are the woman who made this cold tomb feel like a home. You are beautiful, Ruby. Every soft, perfect inch of you." Ruby gasped as Vincent leaned in, crashing his lips against hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of possession, of deep, starved passion. Ruby melted into him, her heavy body pressing against his hard, muscular frame. She tasted rain danger and an overwhelming, fiercely protective love. Her hands tangled in his thick, dark hair as she kissed him back, finally letting go of the shame she had carried her entire life. She wasn't too big. She wasn't unworthy. In the arms of the most dangerous man in Chicago, she was exactly right. In the weeks that followed, the Romano syndicate noticed a change in their boss. He was still ruthless, still untouchable, but the icy demeanor had cracked. The elite nannies were permanently banned from the estate. Instead, the halls were filled with the sound of a toddler's laughter, the smell of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls, and the deep, rumbling chuckle of Vincent Romano as he held the woman he loved, the beautiful, fiercely protective, curvy queen of his empire. If you were captivated by Ruby and Vincent's thrilling journey from a cold mansion to a fiery romance, hit that like button right now. Share this story with your friends who love a good mafia drama filled with unexpected twists, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping, real-life inspired tales. Drop a comment below on what you think Mickey's final fate should have been. See you in the next video.